I think we'll do this, and we'll make this the last question, because then we'll have 12 or 13 for the next one. And that will be the end of it. But by golly, this is great stuff and great fun. And if I do say so myself, it's really been a blast. So we'll end with this one, because this one's going to take a while. Jacob Belchak says, engaging liberal brain again. Boy, Jacob Belchak has engaged the liberal brain twice. I should have put those two together. He could have got the free play on the pinball machine. So speaking parenthetically and cynically, he says, why do all you right-wingers blindly ignore proven evolution and believe in a cosmic Jewish zombie? Well, let's start with the beginning part of that gigantic lie. First of all, not all right-wingers ignore evolution. I'd be curious to know what the percentage of people who call themselves conservatives are that do believe in an old earth and the theory of evolution, but I'd be willing to bet you it's a significant majority. Significant majority. Now, there are some people that don't believe in an old earth and that think that evolution is scientific fiction and that we can't know what happened millions of years ago. I could respectfully disagree with those people, but that wasn't really the question. Let me just say this, however. Speaking to my personal beliefs, not trying to convince anybody else of this particular point, but speaking to my personal beliefs about why I do, in fact, have a great deal of confidence in evolution and a great deal of confidence in a very old earth. We're not talking about whether or not there's a God, and we're not talking about whether or not he built the universe. What we're talking about is, if indeed God did build the earth and the universe, then he has constructed in it numerous, and I mean numerous, extremely repeatable, mathematically predictable elements of that universe to indicate that it is in fact very old, that the earth is 4.6 billion years old, that the overall age of the universe is 12 billion years, somewhere 12 to 15, somewhere in that ballpark. So while at one time I was arrogant enough to think I knew more than God or everybody else who lived in history, I no longer have that arrogance. But what I can say with some confidence is, if God did in fact construct this universe and this world, he has built into it multiple, interlocking, testable, repeatable pathways of evidence, not just individual pieces of evidence, but pathways of evidence to indicate that the world is in fact very old and that life forms have been evolving from the time they've been on the earth. And you get into things like radiocarbon decay indicates something, and redshift of galaxies indicates something, and you can follow the pathways of genetic gene structure and so on. And all these things not only back each other up, but they back each other up numerically, mathematically. They're indicating the same general age. It is true that we used to think the Earth was not as old as we think it is now, and it's true that science constantly adjusts itself. But the reason I have confidence in evolution and not in global warming is because it's not like we have a model for evolution, which is then showing constantly cases where the model and the evidence do not agree, and therefore we're assuming that the evidence has to be wrong. The evidence for evolution and an old Earth are orders of magnitude greater than they are for something like global warming. So, I'm not going to presume to tell God what to do or why he did what he did, but there are, in fact, expanding galaxies and expanding at a rate that indicates a precise time when they were all in the same place, and that these measurements are made thousands of times a year, if not thousands of times a week, and that they are consistent and repeatable, and they're built into the laws of nature that God presumably created. We have structures of sediment, we have structures of carbon dating, we have the evolution of bones over time where bones are doing things in certain directions, and all of this evidence is repeatable, and all of this evidence is built into the world. We didn't put those fossils there, we dug them up, we found them. Somebody put them there. They got there somehow. So, I think it's presumptuous. I am speaking for myself here. I think it's presumptuous to say that if these things are built into the structure of the universe in such a consistent manner, if this is in fact the creation of God, then God is trying to tell us something. And if he's lying to us on purpose, that's a little different. So the first part of your question, I'm not sure I buy, Jacob, that most right-wingers ignore evolution and an old Earth. I'm not sure I believe that at all. I do find that conservatives are far less likely to believe that that's all there is to it. And I was one of those people that believed that all there was to it until I started thinking about bigger issues than that. So now let's get to the idea of the cosmic Jewish zombie. I'm going to answer this question as a person who has extremely serious questions about resurrection of Christ. And I think that's about the limit of the box for me now. I would have told you before I thought the whole thing was just nonsense and drivel and the whole idea of a God was drivel and all this, but I don't believe that anymore. So, let's reduce it. It is extremely unlikely in terms of average everyday human events that this happened. The claim is that these were not average everyday human events. There's a lot of evidence that this stuff happened, a lot of first-person evidence that it happened, all this other stuff. I'm actually going to dismiss that argument because I don't know. I don't know. Faith is a gift for some people, and this is something I have serious questions about. So I don't know. But I will say something, and I think this something needs to be said to people like progressives who talk about Jesus and Christianity as the cosmic Jewish zombie. What I do know is history, politics, and how people behave. This is, to my utter amazement, the area of life that I've become a student of, and as a layman, I would say, have a decent background on. So I will tell you this. Belief in the cosmic Jewish zombie has created everything good in this world. Whether or not that man was resurrected out of the tomb, the belief that he was, and the things that he did say, there's no possible rational disagreement with what Jesus actually said and preached. That is not up for discussion. The only issue up for discussion is the resurrection. But what I'm saying is, since I wasn't there, what I am saying with a very high degree of certainty is this, is that the teachings of that man, coupled with the belief that he did rise from the grave, because if people didn't believe that he rose from the grave, then these teachings wouldn't have the power that they have. Those teachings, without question, are responsible for everything good and decent in this world. They're responsible for the internet. They're responsible for the fact that I criticize the most powerful man in the world every single day without any fear whatsoever for my personal safety. Those teachings and that belief are responsible for that. They're responsible for this chair that I'm sitting in. They're responsible for the prosperity that we have. They're responsible for everything. And you have to be trying very, very, very hard to not see that that is true. Because I tried very hard not to see that it was true. The fundamental breakthrough belief of Christianity is that there is residing within every individual human, because it's not got anything to do with how old the earth is. When it gets right down to it, we're talking about people. We're talking about people and people's lives. We're talking about people's lives and how they live people, whether we live under tyranny. When I say tyranny, whether we're shot in the head, whether your little girl is shot in the head or not, it's dependent on what I'm about to say. So I don't care about the age of the earth. None of this is mattering to me. Really, what gets right down to it is this. The belief, multi-part belief of Christianity is what allows all this to happen, and I'll outline them for you as quickly as I can. First of all, the idea that an individual person has an immortal soul means that a small child outweighs the earth, that a baby girl outweighs the earth, the history of the earth, that the belief, whether it's true or not, doesn't really matter, because the belief that a baby girl who's drowning in the river is worth more than the Andromeda Galaxy or any collection of inanimate matter. That belief that the divinity of every single individual human being carries makes individuality possible. If there is no uniqueness to a person, if that person is not unique and priceless, that's what the soul does. Because I'm not claiming that socialists or atheists don't understand that people are unique. Of course they understand that they're unique. And look, I'm going to get to this whole atheist business about morality of atheism in a second. But I'm talking about the power of Christianity here. The belief that an individual person is priceless is essential to our way of life. And furthermore, the idea that we have within us a consciousness, a conscience, a savior, a person or authority that we have to answer to whether we get caught or not. See, this is the thing. What Christianity brings to the world is it brings accountability of action that is not dependent on surveillance or coercion. I wish I'd wrote that down. That's what it brings. It brings a sense that you are responsible for decency and justice in your own personal behavior, whether people see you doing it or not. There is no darkness of night in Christianity. You don't get to do something that nobody found out about, as the mass murders in the Soviet Union and the rest of these places leads us forever and ever and ever. No. Whether people see you or not, doesn't matter. You did it and you are responsible for it and you're going to pay. That provides virtue in people. And when you have virtuous people who behave themselves and do the right thing, then you can have a society where people are left alone. And I could do this whole, and I'm not going to spend 3 hours on this, although I easily could. When I say I'm not going to spend 3 hours on it, doesn't mean I can't do it. It doesn't mean I won't do it. It just means I'm not going to do it now. But basically, the fundamental aspect of Christianity is the primacy, the divinity of an individual person, which means that the state and all of its needs and all of its resources and all of its desires don't outweigh you at all. Nothing. Nothing outweighs you. I want to live in a society where if a kid is down a well someplace or lost at sea, a person's out had a sailboat sink in the Pacific, I want to live in a society where we don't ask what is a reasonable amount to expend on saving this person, or, well, it's just one of 300 million people. It's just the masses. Whenever you hear people talk about the masses, you've got a genuine, absolute bastard on your hand. I like living in a place where somebody says, what do we spend to save this person who's out there in the Atlantic drowning? I like to live in a place where we say, we spend what it takes. We spend what it takes. We spend what it takes. I like to live in a world, and I like to be part of a military, or at least a country that has a military, that says, we've got a guy back there. He's wounded on a hill. How many guys do we send after him, knowing that those guys could be lost? We send as many as it takes to get him out. That's how many we send. I want to live in a world like that. I want to live in a world where soldiers will say, we've left 2 guys out on a hill. Who wants to go back and get them? We may all be killed. Everybody raises their hands because that person is priceless. You see, they're priceless. And I have done nothing but for the last 6 months. I have done nothing for the last 6 months with the limited spare time I have, but read about the Nazis and especially the Bolsheviks and the murder and the murder and the murder. And we say 6 million, 10 million, 12 million, 30 million, 50 million. It doesn't even break through our skulls what that means on a person by person by person by person by person basis. In the Lubyanka building in Moscow, people were lined up 5 or 6 in front of doors and shot with pistols as a factory every day and every night. Every day and every night. The murder, the ruin of lives, the people shot in front of their daughters, little girls taken out in a forest and shot in the back of the head. This is what matters, and nothing else does. Everything else, philosophy, how old the earth is, who really cares how old the earth is? We're in here, and we're not going to be here to find out. None of that matters. What matters is, does your child come home to you at night, or does that child get taken out in the back of the woods and shot by somebody in the back of the head? That's what matters. And a world where individuals are held in primacy, and a world where individuals are expected to behave themselves because of the standards of their religious beliefs, is a world that can create this country that I love so much. That's it. Now, atheists will say, that you do not have to believe in Christianity in order to have morality, because they don't believe in Christianity and they are perfectly moral people. And they are 100% correct when they say that. They are 100% correct. There are people who have no religious beliefs at all who are absolutely 100% completely decent moral people who make all the same arguments I'm making without any belief in religion whatsoever. I fully get that. I fully accept it. But the thing that they do not seem to understand is that their morality, which they may not be basing on a belief in God, is built into the society that birthed them, and the religion of that society is in fact built into the walls that birthed them. In other words, you can absolutely, without question, be a fully moral atheist in America today, but your morality may not be derived by your current belief in God, but your morality is without question derived from a society whose history has a belief in God, souls, individuality, and virtue. There's just no question about it at all. So to my mind, the issue of evolution is irrelevant to this discussion. I look at evolution as something that is fascinating and, without question, explains virtually everything about biology. And I don't think there's really much room for discussion on that point from the point of biology. The whole reason that evolution becomes a hot-button issue is because some people believe that the existence of evolution disproves the existence of God. I don't see how that's necessarily true at all. At all. I don't see it that way. And I see it, in fact, in the other way. I see so much evidence for evolution, as I do for things like an old Earth in astronomy and in physics and in radiocarbon dating, geology, and everywhere. I see all of this everywhere. And I ask myself, if this universe is in fact created by God, why did he put this evidence here? Why? Why? It's not for me to answer, because I can't answer, and neither can you. But it is for me to ask. It is for me to ask. Because the other question you have to ask is, why give me the power to ask? If God created the universe and everything in it, why give me the power to ask this question? Why give me the intellectual capability to set up the kind of activities and experiments that can in fact derive an answer? And then why build so much evidence into the actual world that provide me with a consistent, coherent answer to the question that I was given to ask in the first place if it's not true? There may be a great reason for it. Maybe the reason is to test my faith. That's entirely possible. I don't know. But I do know that to claim that there's no evidence for evolution is to not understand evolution. And when people say, oh, we're descended from monkeys, it's whenever I hear anybody say we're descended from monkeys, I know they don't know what they're talking about. That's just not how it works. And I don't like inaccuracy. And I don't like, I've said before that I like to be where the evidence is. People say there's no evidence for evolution. That's just not true. It's just not true. There is tons and tons and tons of evidence for evolution. Tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. And that's why I believe in it. Because if there wasn't, I wouldn't. So there you go. In any event, this question is one of those questions like abortion where you end up closing the show thinking all you've managed really to do here is to piss off everybody who's watching the show. But that's certainly not my intention or anything, or my obligation. I feel like my obligation to you as the Strata Loungers that you are, which has always been the Praetorian Guard of the people who enjoy what I do, my obligation to you is to speak the truth as I see it. To me, that's what interests you about me. I have a pretty wide background and a pretty wide set of perspectives. So that's what you're going to get from me, the truth as I see it. And I'm not going to pull it, and I'm not going to skew it, and I'm not going to cover it up. I'm going to tell you how I feel. Now, whether anybody else agrees with me in where I am, that's great. But at the very least, it hopefully gives you something to think about. So, God, the universe, and everything, pretty simple, really. Just sign them up, and I'll knock them down. We got another 12 or 13 questions to do, but we are now at 2 hours and 19 minutes, and I'm not going to 3 hours tonight because I think I start getting, I don't want to say bored, I just start losing energy and perspective, and I get the feeling I've said everything I kind of need to say tonight. So there we go.